Today started like any other, slipping into my usual gray suit. It's my armor, my camouflage, my way of blending in when most people expect a CEO to stand out. And believe me, as the head of Forrester Technologies, one of America's fastest growing companies, I could stand out. But there's a quiet power in being overlooked, a freedom to observe how the world truly operates when no one thinks an important person is watching. This anonymity has taught me more than any boardroom ever could. My town car hummed towards O'Hare, the city's sprawl giving way to the airport's organized chaos. My assistant, David, handed over a slim portfolio. Your documents, Miss Forrester. And remember, the board meets you at JFK at 3 p.m. I nodded, the weight of the papers a physical reminder of the day's magnitude. Today isn't just a flight, it's the prelude to the biggest announcement of my career, a $2.8 billion acquisition that will completely reshape our industry. The pressure is immense, but it's the kind of pressure I thrive on. A quick check of my phone confirmed a dinner next week with Howard Richardson, the CEO of Meridian Airlines. His company handles all our executive travel, a contract worth millions annually. It's a valuable relationship for both of us, though we've never actually met in person. That's fine by me. Keeps the observations pure. Inside the terminal, I bypassed the main security line, heading straight for the premium access gate. The attendant barely glanced at my boarding pass and ID before waving me through. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," he mumbled, already looking past me to the next passenger, just as I expected. This polite indifference, the casual dismissal, it's something I've grown accustomed to. Early in my career, it bothered me, seeing men in suits command instant respect while I constantly had to prove myself. These days, I almost welcome it. It's a lens through which I see genuine human behavior. The premium lounge was the usual sea of tailored suits and confident voices, a mix of market trends and golf handicaps. I chose a quiet corner, ordered a sparkling water, and pulled out my notes. The acquisition documents needed one final review. I was so absorbed I nearly missed the boarding announcement. As I approached the gate, I saw the crew greeting passengers. The lead flight attendant, Lindsay, was practically gushing over an older executive. "Mr. Peterson, so wonderful to see you again. We've reserved your favorite scotch." When it was my turn, her smile vanished. "Boarding pass?" she asked, her voice flat, eyes already scanning for the next face. "Seat 3C, she directed, pointing down the aisle, not bothering to meet my gaze. My flight had officially begun. Settling into my window seat in first class, I observed the cabin filling up. Mostly men, a predictable demographic in their 50s and 60s, a scattering of younger executives. Each male passenger received a personalized greeting from the cabin crew. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Welcome back. Can I start you with champagne?" "Mr. Pierce, we haven't seen you in a few weeks. How was London?" I watched it all with quiet interest, a mental tally forming. Not once was I offered a pre-flight beverage. My Meridian Airlines profile clearly lists me as a Platinum Elite member, over 100,000 miles flown in the past year alone. Yet I remained unacknowledged, an invisible first-class passenger. As the final passengers boarded, a tall man in a tailored gray suit approached my row. "3D," he said with a practiced smile, gesturing to the aisle seat beside me. "Looks like we're neighbors today." Jonathan Pierce, his monogrammed cufflinks subtly peeking from under his sleeve, settled in. He immediately signaled to a passing flight attendant. "Lindsay, good to see you again," he called, as if they were old friends. Lindsay's face lit up, a genuinely warm smile I hadn't seen directed at me. I returned to my documents, feigning absorption, but my attention was keenly focused. I knew from experience this would be an enlightening flight, though not in the way the crew might expect. The safety demonstration concluded and the aircraft pushed back from the gate. My documents were stowed now, my gaze subtly tracking the cabin dynamics. Lindsay and another flight attendant moved through first class, offering hot towels. "Here you are, Mr. Pierce," Lindsay said, presenting the steaming towel with a flourish. "Careful, it's hot." When she reached me, she simply placed the towel on my tray table without a word, already turning toward the next row. I wiped my hands slowly, observing as Lindsay chatted comfortably with the businessman across the aisle. It wasn't that I expected special treatment. It was the stark difference in basic courtesy, the clear distinction in how service was rendered, that truly captured my attention. This quiet indifference, the polite yet pointed neglect, was becoming a familiar pattern. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the SEAX cabin service began. Lindsay approached the first row, tablet in hand. "Good morning, gentlemen. For today's lunch, we have a seared salmon with quinoa, a premium Angus beef burger, or a gourmet chicken wrap. And what can I get you to drink?" I listened as she worked her way through the cabin, her warm, attentive approach unwavering with each male passenger. Jonathan beside me ordered the beef burger with a scotch on the rocks. "Excellent choice, Mr. Pierce," she replied, beaming. When Lindsay finally reached me, her demeanor shifted subtly. No smile, no eye contact, just efficiency. "What would you like?" she asked, her tone flat. "Could you tell me about the lunch options, please?" I asked politely. Her lips tightened slightly. "We have a sandwich or a wrap left." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought there was salmon and beef as well." "Those are limited," Lindsay replied curtly. "We've run out." From the corner of my eye, I noticed her serving the salmon dish to a male passenger who had boarded after me, just 2 rows ahead. I made a mental note but didn't comment. "The wrap then, and sparkling water, please." "We'll serve shortly," Lindsay said, moving away without acknowledgement. Jonathan leaned over slightly. "First time in first class?" he asked, his tone conversational but slightly condescending. "Not exactly," I replied with a small smile. "I fly frequently." "Well, tip for next time, book the kosher meal in advance. It's always better than the standard options, and they can't run out because it's reserved." I nodded politely. "Thank you for the advice." As drinks were served, I noted Jonathan received his scotch in a crystal glass, the premium brand visible on the bottle. My sparkling water came in a plastic cup without a lemon slice, unlike the other beverages I observed being served. The man to my right, an older executive who had boarded last, received not only his requested bourbon, but also warm nuts and a personal check-in from the purser. When the meals arrived, the discrepancy became even more apparent. Jonathan's tray featured the beef burger on proper china, garnished with microgreens and accompanied by truffle fries. A linen napkin and metal cutlery completed the presentation. Lindsay placed my tray before me with barely a glance. Instead of the wrap I had ordered, there was a plain turkey sandwich on a paper plate with a packet of chips. Plastic cutlery was wrapped in a thin napkin. "This isn't what I ordered," I noted calmly. Lindsay gave me a brief, tight smile. "We ran out of wraps too. This tray suits you just fine." She moved on before I could respond. From the seat behind me, I overheard a male passenger being offered both the wrap and salmon options, the very items supposedly out of stock. I took out my phone, opened my notes app, and began typing discreetly. This wasn't the first time I'd experienced such treatment while traveling, but it was certainly the most blatant, and on this particular day, with this particular airline, the timing couldn't have been more significant. I unwrapped the sandwich slowly, maintaining my composed demeanor despite the obvious slight. The bread was slightly stale, the filling sparse, nothing like the gourmet meals being served around me. As I took a small bite, I observed Lindsay attending to Jonathan with extra attention. "How's the burger, Mr. Pierce? Can I get you another scotch?" "Excellent as always, Lindsay," he replied, "and yes, another would be perfect." Lindsay beamed at him before turning away, never acknowledging me beside him. It was as if there were an invisible barrier between seats 3C and 3D. I sipped my water, continuing my careful documentation on my phone. 20 minutes into the meal service, I noticed the flight attendants gathered near the galley. Lindsay's voice carried just enough for me to catch fragments. Always complaining, "Shouldn't be up here anyway." A subtle glance showed Lindsay gesturing in my direction while whispering to another crew member. The other attendant peeked over, then quickly looked away when she noticed me watching. Jonathan had struck up a conversation with the businessman across the aisle, their voices carrying confidently as they discussed their latest golf outings and business acquisitions. I remained quiet, listening as they exchanged cards and made plans to meet at a country club the following week. "Excuse me," I finally said, pressing my call button. The light remained illuminated for nearly 5 minutes before Lindsay approached. her expression making clear the interruption was unwelcome. Yes? Her tone was clipped, professional but cold. I didn't receive any dessert, I noted calmly, having observed chocolate mousse being served to other passengers in first class. Lindsay's smile didn't reach her eyes. We've run out. Anything else? Before I could respond, Lindsay was already turning away. As she did, her elbow deliberately knocked against my water cup, spilling it across the tray. Oh, Lindsay's surprise seemed performative. I'm so sorry about that. She grabbed a thin napkin and dropped it on the puddle, making minimal effort to clean up the spill that was now dripping onto my gray slacks. Let me know if you need anything else, Lindsay added before walking away, leaving me to deal with the mess. Jonathan glanced over, offering a perfunctory tough luck before returning to his conversation across the aisle. I dabbed at my damp pants, adding another note to my phone. I had experienced my share of subtle discrimination throughout my career, but rarely so blatantly. As a woman who had risen from entry-level programmer to CEO, I developed a thick skin and a strategic mind. When the head purser passed by a few minutes later, I stopped him with a polite gesture. Excuse me, could I please have your name? The man looked surprised but answered professionally. Kevin Matthews, ma'am. Is there a problem I can help with? Not at the moment, Mr. Matthews. I'd just like to know for my records. His expression shifted to confusion, but he nodded and continued down the aisle. From my seat, I could see Lindsay serving freshly brewed coffee to the businessmen, offering them chocolate biscotti that had mysteriously appeared despite the supposed dessert shortage. When Jonathan received his coffee in a porcelain cup with the biscotti on a small plate, Lindsay deliberately avoided looking in my direction. The message was clear. Some passengers deserve premium service, and in Lindsay's estimation, I was not among them. I closed my notes app and opened my email instead. My mind was already shifting gears, moving from observation to execution. This wasn't just about a bad flight, it was about a pattern, a systemic issue that needed to be addressed. And I knew exactly how to address it. I composed a message addressed to my assistant, David. Please gather the contact information for Howard Richardson's office. I'll need to speak with him directly after landing. Priority level, immediate. With that sent, I settled back in my seat, outwardly calm while my mind worked through the precise steps I would take once we reached New York. Every slight, every dismissive glance, every lie about running out of food was now a data point in my meticulously built case. The remainder of the flight continued in much the same pattern. When the beverage service came around again, Lindsay managed to skip my row entirely, though she cheerfully offered Jonathan another scotch. When I used my call button again, a different flight attendant responded, though her demeanor suggested Lindsay had already spoken to her about the difficult passenger in 3C. I requested a coffee, receiving it after a considerable delay in a paper cup, lukewarm and black, without the milk I had requested. Rather than calling attention to the error, I simply added it to my growing documentation. Every detail was important. An hour before landing, the purser, Kevin Matthews, made his way through the cabin, distributing hot towels to refresh the passengers. When he reached me, he hesitated, glancing toward the galley where Lindsay was watching. "Would you care for a hot towel, ma'am?" he asked, his tone neutral but his expression uncertain. "Yes, thank you," I replied with a small smile. After he moved on, I noticed Lindsay approach him in the galley, whispering something that made him look back at me with renewed wariness. Jonathan had fallen asleep beside me, his half-finished scotch still clutched loosely in his hand. Across the aisle, 2 other businessmen were discussing a recent merger, their voices carrying easily. "Did you hear about Forrester Technologies?" one asked. "Word is they're announcing a major acquisition tomorrow." "Camille Forrester's company," the other replied. "She's been making waves lately, not what anyone expected from her when she took over. She's ruthless from what I hear, brilliant but doesn't suffer fools." I kept my expression neutral, though a hint of a smile played at the corner of my mouth. My reputation preceded me in business circles, though few would recognize my face. I had deliberately maintained a low profile throughout my career, rarely appearing in press photos and declining most speaking engagements. This anonymity had served me well, allowing me to observe people's true behavior, rather than the deferential facade often presented to known executives. The irony of their conversation, given the treatment I was receiving, was not lost on me. It only solidified my resolve. The aircraft began its descent into JFK. I closed my laptop and stowed my belongings, catching Lindsay's eye briefly as she passed by. She quickly looked away, her discomfort evident now that she had overheard the businessman's conversation. The captain's announcement filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent into New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, please ensure your seat belts are fastened, your tray...
Rue creation, I discovered, begins within. I didn't need to manipulate the world. I only needed to occupy the state of already having what I wanted. When I became one with that feeling, the world had to conform. That was the law. That was the order of things. I started seeing these normal miracles in my own life. A solution to a long-standing problem would suddenly appear, not through my frantic effort, but after I had simply assumed the problem was solved and moved on in my mind. An unexpected opportunity would arise after I had lived for days in the feeling of having achieved a certain goal. These weren't grand, dramatic events, but rather the quiet, undeniable evidence that my inner conviction was indeed shaping my outer reality. To me, they were simply the natural result of my inner belief. One of the most liberating breakthroughs for me was understanding that the world of appearances, the conditions, the circumstances, the facts, is not the source of my experience. It's merely an echo, a shadow, an outpicturing of an earlier state of mind. For years, I had been trying to change my life by wrestling with these outward reflections. It was like looking in a mirror, seeing my face was dirty, and trying to clean the reflection instead of washing my actual face. It was futile, exhausting, and utterly fruitless. I realized that the outer world is always late. What I saw with my eyes, what I experienced in my immediate reality, was not the present. It was the past crystallized, the delayed manifestation of previous thoughts and assumptions. The moment I truly grasped this, I felt an immense sense of freedom. I stopped reacting to every setback, every challenge, every piece of bad news. I stopped chasing after solutions in the external world, and I certainly stopped explaining or complaining about what was happening. Instead, I began to create consciously by mastering my inner realm. To command the inner meant making deliberate choices about my thoughts, my emotions, and the scenes I played out in my imagination. It meant holding firmly to my vision, even when the outer world presented contradictory evidence. This wasn't stubbornness. It was a profound understanding that what I desired already was in the unseen, in the eternal realm of imagination, and if I persisted there, the outer world had to conform. When I invested my attention in what I wanted to be, I wasn't escaping reality. I was actively creating it. I was moving from the temporary to the permanent, from the visible effect to the invisible cause. It wasn't about denying what was happening, but transcending it. I would acknowledge the current situation, but I refused to let it dictate my inner world. Instead, I chose to dwell in the unseen state of fulfillment, knowing that in time, the outer would catch up. There's immense power in withdrawing attention from what you don't want. Where my focus went, energy flowed. If I continued to stare at problems, they grew. But if I turned within and dwelt on the solution began to manifest. This wasn't wishful thinking. It was alignment with the law of consciousness. I was always manifesting. The only question was whether I was doing it deliberately or by default. This disengagement wasn't inaction. It was inspired non-reaction, a deliberate choice to no longer be a victim of appearances. I stepped into my true role as creator, withdrawing from the drama of conditions, and began to command my inner world. My understanding of silence deepened significantly over time. It wasn't just about refraining from complaining anymore. It evolved into a conscious, powerful discipline. I began to see it as a refusal to energize any reality that was passing away, any old condition, any unwanted circumstance that I was ready to leave behind. My silence became a strategic act, a way of cutting off the lifeblood to what I no longer wished to experience. This advanced practice also transformed how I used my words. Knowing that every word was a creative seed, I became incredibly deliberate. I decided I would speak only of what I desired, declaring the end from the beginning, describing my life not as it was, but as it would be once my wish was fulfilled. If I couldn't speak of my desire with absolute confidence, then I simply wouldn't speak of it at all. This meant no more rehearsing suffering, no more detailing what was wrong, no more describing the lack. My words were either watering the seed of my dream or feeding the weeds of my doubt, and I chose to be a careful gardener. My inner quietness became an invisible signal to the universe. It was a clear, unmistakable message that I had turned within, that I was now communing with the infinite source of all creation, rather than pleading with the finite, external world. This profound internal shift had a magnetic effect. Others might not have understood my newfound quietness or my unwavering confidence, but they responded to the shift in my energy. The world around me began to conform, not because I argued or begged, but because I dared to trust in the unseen power within. I often thought of my imagination as my sacred temple. What I built there, in stillness and in faith, had to become real. I understood that just as seeds do not sprout when constantly disturbed or dug up, manifestations do not flourish when constantly doubted, explained away, or spoken of negatively. My silence became the protective shield around these nascent creations, allowing them to grow undisturbed. This quiet confidence, born from consistent inner work, was my strength. It announced to the universe, without a single spoken word, I know who I am. I know what I have assumed. I know it is done. And in that quiet knowing, the miracles began to appear, not as surprises, but as the most natural outcome of a mind that had learned to never complain, never explain, and never doubt its own creative authority. As I continued to apply these principles, something remarkable happened. The need to argue, to defend, or even to explain my journey to others simply vanished. It wasn't a conscious decision to stop. It was a natural fading, like a habit I had outgrown. My transformed life, the subtle yet undeniable shifts in my reality, became the undeniable proof of the law in action. I no longer had to convince anyone. The evidence was unfolding before their eyes, and more importantly, within my own experience. I remember moments when friends or family who had previously questioned my unconventional approach would comment on positive changes in my life. They might not understand the how, the inner work, the assumptions, the disciplined silence, but they couldn't deny the what. A new opportunity would appear, a challenging relationship would soften, or a financial situation would unexpectedly improve. My peace, my quiet confidence in these tangible results became my most powerful message. They spoke volumes without me uttering a single word of justification. I developed an incredible inner resilience. I became truly unmoved by opinion and unshaken by disbelief. Before, a skeptical comment or a doubtful look from someone I respected could send me spiraling into self-doubt. Now, my certainty came from within, from consistently applying the law and seeing its consistent results. Their skepticism was simply their perspective, not my reality. I understood that their outer sight could only perceive what was, while my inner vision was focused on what would be. I no longer just talked about manifestation. I embodied it. I lived from the end, experiencing the joy, the peace, and the relief of my fulfilled desires in my inner world, even before they fully materialized externally. This wasn't pretend, it was a deep, unwavering conviction. I wasn't arguing for my beliefs. I was living from them. And in time, the outer world inevitably caught up to my inner state. This commitment to never complain, never explain has led to a profound shift in my entire being. There's a quiet strength, a radiance of certainty that now emanates from me. It's a powerful, silent message that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. It's the mark of someone who walks by inner vision, not outer sight, and who knows, without a shadow of a doubt, that what lives within will eventually be mirrored without. This journey of never complain, never explain, isn't a destination I reached and then stopped. It's become my continuous practice, the very fabric of how I navigate life. Every day, I consciously choose my inner conversations. I dedicate moments to stillness, anchoring myself in the feeling of my desires already being fulfilled. When a challenge arises, my first instinct is no longer to react with frustration or to seek validation. Instead, I turn inward, assume the solution, and remain in that state of quiet certainty. It's an ongoing refinement, a constant choice to align with the power within. Now, I want to extend this invitation to you. You are already manifesting, every single moment. The only question is whether you are doing it consciously, deliberately, or by default, simply reacting to what appears before you. The power to shape your reality is not something you need to earn or search for outside yourself. It resides within you, waiting for you to claim it. So, I urge you to remember these simple yet profound truths. Never complain. Stop feeding the problems you don't want. Starve them of your precious energy, your words, your attention. When you complain, you agree with limitation and you tell the universe to bring you more of it. Choose silence and watch the unwanted fade. Never explain. You owe no one an explanation for your dreams, your path, or your inner knowing. To explain is to defend, and to defend is to doubt your own authority. Let your life speak for itself. Let your transformation become the undeniable answer to every question. Cultivate that quiet certainty within, and the